The explosion rocked the station with a violent tremor, sending metal groaning as if the very bones of the structure were breaking. Ryker Solis slammed against the cold wall, his breath knocked out of him for a second. His heart thundered in his chest, but he didn't flinch. Soldiers died all around him. That was the truth of war: chaos, fear, and blood. The rest of the galaxy might be watching from the sidelines, but it was his responsibility to keep the last line standing. Humanity's last hope. Rage report. Captain Harlow's voice crackled in his earpiece, urgent, strained. I'm still breathing, Captain, Ryker growled, shoving a fallen soldier's body aside and finding his feet. He was in the heart of the station's command center, the same place where their final defense was supposed to take place. Now, it was a battlefield, torn apart by the relentless Ithor assault. The air was thick with smoke, and sparks arced from damaged conduits above. Fall back to Sector 9! Get the civilians to the lower levels! Harlow ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. She'd always been like that, cool under pressure. But Ryker knew. They weren't going to make it. They'd fought too hard, but the Ithor were everywhere now. Their massive, insected forms crawled over every surface, their mandibles clicking in unison. The collective had overwhelming numbers, and their tactics were methodical, efficient, merciless. Ryker's eyes flicked to the large display screen on the far wall. A red alert flashed across the top. Critical breach detected in Sector 5. The breach was too close to the civilians. They wouldn't make it in time. His mind spun. The resistance fighters, the civilians, everyone, they were all just pieces in a war game. The Ithor didn't care. They never had. We need to buy time. Where's the secondary defense line? Ryker said, pulling a weapon from the crate beside him. Dead in the water. We've lost control of the perimeter, Harlow replied, the tension evident in her voice. Get your squad to the lower level. We'll meet you there. Understood. Ryker didn't wait for orders. He moved, instinct guiding him as he sprinted for the nearest exit, the clatter of boots echoing on the steel floor. There was no time to waste. He had only seconds to clear the command center before the next wave of alien forces arrived. Outside, the station's long hallways were littered with debris, broken glass, twisted metal, and the charred remnants of fallen comrades. Ryker's squad was scattered, each one fighting for their life. His heart clenched. They were outnumbered. He spotted Sergeant Voss, taking cover behind a pile of broken equipment. His rifle spat rounds at an incoming Ithor soldier, the creature's dark, chitinous exoskeleton absorbing the shots with ease. Voss didn't flinch. Voss! Ryker barked, diving behind cover next to him. How's it look? Voss didn't look at him, his eyes locked on the advancing Ithor troops. Shit's about to get worse, he muttered, reloading. There's a breach on the far side of the hall. They're pushing us into a corner. We're not dying here, Ryker snapped, loading his own weapon. Keep firing. We fall back on my mark. Voss gave him a nod, but the tension in his face was unmistakable. There was no denying it anymore. They were losing. Badly. Ryker's thoughts flickered to the last message he'd received from his unit's codename. Spectre. His squad, his family, the ones he'd failed to protect during the massacre at Doran Station. That weight had never left him, no matter how many battles he'd fought since. Now, as the station's defenses crumbled around him, he was starting to believe he was being tested again. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a reckoning. Fall back to Sector 9! Ryker yelled, his voice cutting through the smoke-filled air. Now! His team moved quickly, under heavy fire, toward the nearest emergency escape route. But before they could make it to safety, the station's alarms went off again. Breach in Sector 9. Immediate evacuation required. **** Ryker's stomach sank. They had to go deeper. Let's go! Ryker shouted, urgency biting into his words. We're not losing this battle yet! As they pushed forward, a distant rumble echoed from above. Ryker looked up. A Ithor warship had just entered orbit, its dark, angular silhouette looming through the shattered windows. His pulse quickened. The invasion wasn't going to stop at the station. They were here to wipe everything out, one station at a time. They rounded a corner, and Ryker saw it. A massive explosion sent debris scattering in every direction. And there, standing amidst the wreckage, was a lone Ithor soldier, watching them with its multifaceted eyes, its sharp mandibles twitching. "Open fire!" Ryker ordered, without hesitation. The sound of weapons erupted, and the alien soldier fell within seconds, its body crumpling into the snow-like debris that had once been a hallway. But there was no time to savor the victory. The warship's shadow loomed larger. Ryker knew what was coming. His comms lit up with an urgent message from Harlow. "They're boarding the station. They're here, we need to evacuate now." "Not yet," Ryker muttered. His hand hovered over the emergency override switch. It was a last-ditch effort. He had to do something. Anything. He activated the hidden access panel, inputting a long-forgotten code, the emergency unit code from his failed mission, the one that had led to the massacre at Doran. The terminal hummed to life. "Unit code recognized. Initiating override sequence," the computer voice announced. He froze. The Ithor forces, the overwhelming numbers, the warship in orbit, it all suddenly felt smaller. He had an edge. The override sequence was set. But as the screen flashed green, something unexpected occurred. A voice crackled through his comms. "Lieutenant Solis, is that you?" Ryker's breath caught. That code wasn't just any override, it was his unit's code. The one that had been erased from all records after the Doran disaster. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It was an old comrade, someone he thought had died with his team. "How / Ryker breathed, but the voice cut him off. "Doesn't matter how. Get to the lower levels, now. You're not alone." The comms cut out before Ryker could respond. His mind reeled. He thought everyone in his unit was gone, lost to the void. But this was impossible. "Move now!" Ryker barked, his heart pounding. Whatever was happening, it was far from over. The fight was just beginning. The lower levels of the station were dark, far darker than they should have been. Ryker's boots echoed off the cold, metallic floors as he sprinted through the dimly lit corridors. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible message he just received. His unit code, his dead comrades, they couldn't be alive. It didn't make sense. But the voice, that voice had been unmistakable. How? He couldn't focus on it now. There was no time. The station was crumbling. Every second felt like an eternity, as they pushed deeper into the bowels of the station. The air grew colder as they descended, the faint hum of the generators fading as the backup systems kicked in. Emergency lighting flickered on and off, casting long, unnatural shadows. "Keep moving!" Ryker barked at his squad. "We're almost there." He could feel the tension in the air, not just from the Ithor closing in, but from his team. They could sense it too, the sense of urgency, the growing uncertainty. Voss was at the front, rifle at the ready, eyes scanning every corner. Beside him, Lieutenant Rhea flanked Ryker, her face as stone-cold as ever, but there was something in her eyes. "I don't like this," Rhea said, her voice low, barely audible above the sound of their boots on the floor. "Feels like they're expecting us." "They are," Ryker said, his eyes narrowing. "They've been waiting. The Ithor never move this fast unless they know exactly where we're going. And that means they know something we don't." Rhea didn't respond, but Ryker saw her lips press into a tight line. She was right to be cautious. Too many times they'd had the rug pulled out from under them, only to find out they were being played. They passed several bulkheads, all sealed tight, their heavy steel doors reinforced against whatever threats might be lurking outside. The deeper they went, the quieter the station became. No alarms, no warnings, just the suffocating silence of a station in crisis. Finally, they reached the last door, the final checkpoint to Sector 9. The door was sealed with a strange insignia, a symbol Ryker had never seen before. It was circular, with jagged lines extending outward, almost like a star. He reached for the terminal to unlock it. Ryker, Voss said, his voice tight with unease. What's that symbol? Ryker hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keypad. Something didn't sit right about it, but he had no time to analyze it further. His gut told him this was their way in. His unit had always trusted his instincts, even when it seemed like they were heading into the unknown. I don't know, Ryker said, swiping the screen. The lock disengaged with a soft click. He pushed the door open. The room beyond was dark, the air thick with stale, artificial atmosphere. His squad entered cautiously, weapons raised, the silence unnerving. Ryker's eyes scanned the room, but it took a moment before he noticed the anomaly. There, at the far end of the room, was a large holographic display, flickering with static. As Ryker approached, the screen blinked to life, casting a cold, blue glow on his face. Welcome, Lieutenant Solis, the voice from earlier crackled through the speakers. Ryker froze. It was him, the voice, the one from his unit code. I've been waiting for you. Who the hell are you? Ryker demanded, his grip tightening around his rifle. The figure on the screen flickered, then stabilized. It was a man. Older than Ryker remembered, but unmistakable. It was Commander Shaw, the leader of his squad, the one he thought had died in the massacre at Doran Station. Shaw? Ryker's voice was thick with disbelief. How are you? We never died, Ryker. Shaw interrupted, his voice flat and calculated. Not in the way you think. Ryker's mind raced. What does that mean? The rest of his squad stood frozen, unsure of whether to respond or stay silent. But Ryker didn't have time for questions. The Ithor were still coming. He motioned for his squad to hold position. Where's the rest of my team? Ryker's voice was sharp. And why the hell didn't you contact us earlier? Shaw's image on the screen seemed to pause, as if considering the question. Because we couldn't. Not until you activated the override sequence. Only then could we reach you. Ryker's stomach twisted. Override sequence? What is this, some kind of trap? Shaw's lips curled into a thin smile, though it was less comforting and more eerie. A trap? Hardly. It's an opportunity, Ryker. An opportunity to end this war, if you're willing to make the hard choice. End this war? Ryker repeated, his mind reeling. How the hell can you end it? The Ithor are everywhere. They're unstoppable. Shaw's expression hardened. We were always meant to do more than just fight. The reason you're still alive, the reason you're hearing this, it's because you're the one who can turn the tide. But you'll have to make an impossible decision. What decision? Ryker asked, his voice low with frustration. Open the terminal behind you. Shaw instructed, his tone colder now. What you'll find inside will answer your questions. But be warned, Ryker, it's not what you think. Ryker turned around slowly. The terminal was old, the screen covered in dust. He wiped it away, fingers trembling, but the moment the screen flickered to life, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just a message. It was a map. A map leading to the heart of the Ithor Collective, showing the exact location of their command center. But there was more, far more. Hidden beneath the surface of the map were coordinates to a weapon, something catastrophic. Ryker. Shaw's voice came again, quieter now. That weapon can destroy the Collective. But it will destroy everything else too. Every remaining human colony, every star we've fought to protect. Ryker's mind swirled. Destroy the Collective, yes. But at what cost? If the weapon was real, it could be the answer. But could they risk everything? You've got one chance to stop this. Shaw continued, his voice strained. Make your choice, Ryker. Before it's too late. The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving Ryker staring at the screen in silence. His fingers hovered over the terminal, torn between the need for revenge and the unknown consequences of the weapon. Behind him, Voss spoke, his voice hesitant. We don't have time for this, Ryker. The Ithor will be here any minute. Ryker's heart hammered in his chest. What do I do? The walls of the station vibrated with the thunderous approach of the Ithor. Ryker stood motionless in front of the terminal, the weight of Shaw's message still hanging over him like a thick fog. The coordinates on the screen were burned into his mind, but it wasn't just the weapon he was thinking about now. It was the cost. The weapon could wipe out the Ithor, yes, but it would wipe out the last of humanity's colonies, too. The stakes had never been higher. Voss was the first to break the silence. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" His voice was tight, full of disbelief. "That weapon could destroy everything. We're fighting to save humanity, not bury it." "I know," Ryker said, voice hoarse. His mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. "But if we don't take out the Ithor now, there won't be anything left to save." Rhea's voice cut in, calm but with an edge. "What if Shaw's lying? What if he's already compromised? We don't even know if we can trust him." Riker's gaze snapped to hers. "I don't trust him. But I don't have another choice." The harsh beeping of the comms cut through the tension. A grating voice filled the room. "Ryker, you're wasting time. They're already on their way. You'll never make it unless you move now." It was Harlow. Her voice, though commanding, carried the edge of urgency. Riker's fingers clenched around his rifle. "Understood," Ryker muttered, slamming the terminal's lid shut. He turned to his team. "We move out. Now." The room fell into motion. They had no choice but to push forward. They couldn't afford to waste time. Riker's thoughts were still heavy with Shaw's words, but he pushed them aside for the moment. There would be time to think later, if they survived. They sprinted through the corridors, a blur of motion. The flickering emergency lights did nothing to reassure them. Every sound, every creak of the station's failing infrastructure, made their skin crawl. The Ithor were close, far closer than Ryker wanted to admit. He could hear their clicking mandibles, their guttural voices echoing down the hallways. The walls themselves seemed to be closing in. "Left," Ryker barked, pointing. The map from the terminal had led them here, an access tunnel that, according to Shaw's coordinates, would take them to the weapon. But it was not going to be easy to get there. The hallway split into 3 directions, one of which led to the hangar where the escaped ships were parked. The other 2 were near complete dead ends, or so they thought. As Riker's squad reached the junction, a shrill alarm sounded, followed by the unmistakable thud of alien footsteps. Riker's blood ran cold. The Ithor had already breached the perimeter. "Lock down those doors," Ryker commanded, turning back toward the passageway leading to the hangar. The squad responded in unison, moving quickly to seal off the corridor they had just come through. "I'll take point," Voss said, adjusting his helmet and positioning himself at the front of the line. Ryker nodded, motioning for Rhea to cover their rear. They had no illusions left. This was it, the final push. The corridor stretched out in front of them, seemingly endless. Riker's mind raced. The Ithor's presence loomed just behind them, but the weapon, whatever it was their only hope. It had to be. "You ready?" Ryker asked Voss, who glanced back briefly. "No time for ready, Ryker," Voss muttered. "Just get us there." The tension between them was palpable. Ryker could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. There was no guarantee that the weapon would work. But it was their only shot. The station's air grew thinner as they advanced deeper. Riker's boots clicked on the metal floor with each step, louder than they should have been. He glanced behind him. Rhea was still there, her eyes cold and focused. Voss was moving ahead, his silhouette a blur in the dim lighting. They didn't need to speak. They were beyond words. Each of them had already made the decision that mattered. The tunnel ahead narrowed. Their steps grew heavier, more deliberate. Ryker pushed the door open, revealing a room dimly lit by harsh white lights. The hum of machinery filled the air. There, at the center of the room, was a console, glowing ominously. "That's it," Ryker said, pointing toward the console. The weapon was in there. They'd made it. Voss moved ahead, quickly connecting the necessary cables to the console. A status bar appeared, flickering erratically. The weapon had been powered down for years, maybe longer. Riker's fingers tightened on his rifle, watching every shadow in the room as the seconds passed. "Come on," Voss muttered, his voice strained. "Hurry up." Rhea moved to cover the door, her eyes scanning every angle. "You'd better make it work, Voss. Or we're dead." Ryker swallowed hard, fighting to keep his composure. The longer they stayed, the more exposed they were. He had no idea how long they had before the Ithor arrived. The station was a ticking clock. Finally, the status bar hit 100%. Voss let out a breath of relief. "Got it," he said. "Weapons activated." But before they could celebrate, the room was filled with an ear-splitting screech. The sound of Ithor soldiers crashing through the door sent a surge of adrenaline through Ryker's veins. "Move, move, move!" Ryker shouted, grabbing Voss by the arm and pulling him away from the console. The first Ithor soldier stepped through the door, its mandibles snapping, eyes glinting with malevolent intelligence. It was the first of many. Rhea opened fire, her rifle's rapid bursts tearing through the creature's thick exoskeleton. The Ithor staggered, its body twitching with the shock of each bullet. But more were coming. A lot more. "Get to the secondary exit!" Ryker ordered, his voice urgent. They didn't have time to waste. As the squad retreated, Ryker couldn't shake the feeling that this was all a trap. The Ithor had been waiting for them here, too. It was too easy. They'd fallen into a deeper snare than they realized. The weapon was activated, yes, but the real fight was just beginning. "Asterisk move, asterisk!" Ryker shouted again, his voice ragged with desperation. The station was on the verge of collapse. The Ithor were closing in from all sides. In the midst of the chaos, Ryker's heart pounded with one thought: asterisk, they can't stop us. Not yet, asterisk. The room filled with a deafening roar as the Ithor charged, their numbers swelling. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The station was falling apart. Ryker could feel it in his bones. The walls groaned as they were torn apart by the Ithor's relentless assault. The sound of their claws scraping against metal echoed through the hallways, a constant reminder of how little time they had left. The weapon was activated. Now all they had to do was survive long enough for it to deploy. But survival, in that moment, felt increasingly impossible. "We're not going to make it out of here, are we?" Voss muttered, his face pale as he sprinted alongside Ryker, his rifle slung over his shoulder. "No way." "We will," Ryker growled, his eyes scanning the hallway ahead. "We have to." They rounded a corner, and for a fleeting moment, the space was quiet, eerily so. No Ithor. No weapons fire. Just the sound of their ragged breathing. Rhea came up from the rear, her face tight, her gaze unwavering. "How much longer until the weapon deploys?" "Minutes," Ryker replied, his voice low. "Maybe less." Voss looked at him, doubt written across his face. "And if it doesn't work? What then?" "We don't have that luxury," Ryker snapped. "We have to believe it will work." "Easy for you to say," Voss muttered, but his voice trailed off. He knew it wasn't just about the weapon. It was about what was happening to their people. The entire galaxy was depending on them. If this didn't work, humanity was done. Ryker turned his attention back to the corridor ahead. They were getting closer to the exit. But the closer they got, the heavier the air became. Something wasn't right. He could feel it. The Ithor were closing in. The emergency lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Their footsteps were muted by the thickening atmosphere, a dampness in the air that felt wrong. And then, ahead, at the far end of the corridor, movement. A Ithor warrior stepped out of the shadows, its jagged mandibles clicking as it slowly advanced. Its eyes locked onto Ryker's, an intelligent malice gleaming in the depths of its compound pupils. It knew who he was. It knew the threat he posed. "Damn it!" Ryker muttered under his breath, leveling his rifle. "Take cover!" The Ithor charged, faster than Ryker had anticipated. Voss opened fire first, a steady barrage of rounds slamming into the creature's chest. But the Ithor didn't stop. It continued its relentless charge, faster, stronger, A force of nature that couldn't be stopped by mere bullets. Ryker dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's claws as it slashed at the air. His team fell into formation, but there was no room for mistakes now. The Ithor were just the first wave. There were more coming. Too many more. Rhea! Ryker barked, signaling to her to cover his back. Get to the terminal. We're almost there. Without hesitation, Rhea nodded and sprinted forward, her gun raised as she covered their advance. Voss followed, shooting down another Ithor soldier that emerged from a side hallway, its screech echoing through the station. Ryker moved faster, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling growing in his gut. The Ithor shouldn't have been this close. They should have been fighting their way through a much larger force by now. And then there was the map, the weapon, it all felt like a carefully laid trap. As they neared the terminal, Ryker's comms crackled to life again. Shaw's voice, distant but still sharp, filled his ear. You've made it this far, Ryker. I have to admit I'm impressed. But the real battle begins now. Ryker's blood ran cold. What the hell are you talking about? You're too late. You always were. The weapon you activated. It's already too late to stop what's coming. The collective is already moving to the next phase. Shaw's voice turned smug, dark. You should have left it alone. You did this? Ryker growled, rage boiling in his chest. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This was all part of Shaw's plan. He'd led them here, to the final kill box. And they'd fallen for it. Shaw laughed softly, the sound eerie. Of course I did. You think the Ithor didn't know you were coming? You've been playing into our hands from the beginning. No. Ryker's voice cracked, a mixture of fury and disbelief. You're lying. This is your fault. You set us up to die. The screen flickered, and Shaw's image appeared once again. His face was cold, detached. Not at all, Lieutenant. You were always meant to be the perfect distraction. The real weapon is already in motion. And I'm afraid you won't be around to see it. Ryker's chest tightened as he glanced over at the terminal. There it was, the countdown. It wasn't for the weapon, not for the Ithor. It was a trigger, an initiation sequence for something far worse. The final piece of Shaw's betrayal fell into place. No. Ryker whispered, realizing what had happened. The weapon wasn't meant to destroy the Ithor. It was meant to wipe them all out. Humanity included. A soft beep sounded from the terminal, followed by a countdown, 10 seconds. The plan had been simple. Humanity had been the real threat all along. The collective wasn't interested in subjugation. They wanted humanity gone. And Shaw, once a member of the same squad, had betrayed them all to give the Ithor exactly what they wanted. No! Ryker shouted, his voice raw with fury. Stop it! Stop the countdown! But it was too late. The terminal beeped one last time, and the entire station shuddered. A blinding white light filled the room, and Ryker's heart skipped a beat. It was over. For a moment, everything seemed suspended in time. The screams of the dying Ithor and the sounds of the crumbling station were drowned out by the growing hum of the weapon's core. It was a devastating energy pulse, one that could reach farther than Ryker could comprehend. It wasn't just the Ithor that would be destroyed. Everything would be obliterated. As the light intensified, Ryker stood frozen in place, staring at the now blank terminal. Rhea was beside him, breathing heavily, her face drawn tight with understanding. Voss, always the cynic, looked at Ryker. Well, shit. We're screwed, aren't we? Ryker took a deep breath. We're not dead yet. His hand went to his comms, dialing for the last time. Harlow, do you copy? Ryker's voice was hoarse but clear. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, through the static, Harlow's voice came through, steady, calm. Ryker, what's the status? The countdown's been triggered, Ryker replied. We can't stop it now. But there's still one thing we can do. What? Take the fight to Shaw. He's the one who did this. We end this, or humanity dies.